Now, your host, Ken Brew, on News Radio 700 WLW.
Welcome back on this Saturday. Yes. Saturday in Cincinnati. Who wouldn't like that? Sounds like a perfect day for me. Even if outside it's not all that swift. Doesn't matter. That's how we like it in January. And we like it as long as it's not snowing in January is what we like. Nevertheless, for whatever reason, the Supreme Court decided not to rule on Trump's tariffs. That was expected to come down last Thursday or Friday. It now is supposedly going to come down sometime this week. And when it does, and the Supreme Court is more than likely going to rule against Trump and his tariffs, it will throw for the moment, certainly at least the near future, the economic development and the economic strategy of this administration into a bit of the unknown. And that's to be expected, I think, because Trump's tariffs have been controversial from the start. But what happens if they do decide, the court I'm speaking of now, what if it does decide to do away with the tariffs? What then becomes of the economic growth in this country that everybody, I think, wants to see? 2025 was an awful year for jobs. According to stats just released, about 584,000 jobs were created in 2025. 2 million jobs were added in 2024 and 2023 under the previous administration. 4 million in 2022. Now, a lot of that was because of the economy coming back from COVID. But the jobs that were added in 2025, 584,000 seems extraordinarily low. So what's going on here, and why is Wall Street so out of sync with what's going on with Main Street? Standing by to join us is Dan Varroney, a highly regarded economic strategist, two-time author, and the #1 best-selling book on Amazon.com, Rethinking Economic Growth. And Dan Varroney, how are you on this glorious Saturday?
I'm terrific, Ken. Although it's raining outside, it's sunny inside.
God bless you for that. It should be sunny for everybody that's still walking around and breathing, and sounds like both you and me are. Okay, what happens if the Supreme Court, I think as anticipated, comes back this week and says, you know, Mr. President, these tariffs, they're simply illegal, and you've exceeded your authority with them. What happens to this country at that point economically?
So, based on what I'm reading and what I'm hearing, it sounds like the administration has a Plan B, a Plan C, and a Plan D. And that Plan B, Plan C, Plan D will really be delivered on the basis of what the Supreme Court says. The Supreme Court could say the following. They could say, Mr. President, you have exceeded your authority in the executive branch, and from now on, you need to get the legislative branch to sign off on these. Or they could say, Mr. President, not only have you exceeded your authority, but you got to give the money back. There could be any number of things they say. My sense is the reason for the delay, Ken, and I've been thinking this through a lot, they may be looking for a way, back in my days as a city councilman, back in the day, we used to have a strategy called, we got to find a way to cut the baby in half, right? A way that makes this thing work. It might be that they come up with a definition for what tariffs are, what they should be, and who has the authority to develop and implement them, and at the same time say, Mr. President, you have in fact exceeded your authority. The tariffs that were in effect can stay there, or something along those lines. But I think they are looking to write an opinion that gets them to a middle ground that causes the least possible disruption.
Well, it sounds like from what you just said that the Supreme Court would then be writing policy, which is, as you mentioned earlier, a job for the U.S. Congress, for the House and for the Senate. That to me would seem a little dangerous. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I'm not suggesting. I'm suggesting that that's what they're probably thinking through right now. You know, what should our role be? Right. What is it we should say? The third option could be that they just push it back to the administration and say, you got to go to Congress and figure this out. I think they're looking at any number of scenarios, and I think that's why there is a delay.
Well, if they rule that he has to, or we have to give the money back, that's disastrous. I don't care how many ways you slice it. In an economy that has been very sluggish, since the president, the current administration took over, if he's forced to give the money back, that really would shake Main Street to its core, would it not? There had to be a residual effect for something like that.
You know, it's interesting because, 97% of small businesses export products outside the United States. But at the same time, depending on the sector and small business you talk to, it's been brutal for some, favorable for others. And it's been a dynamic debate. Yes, it has caused uncertainty. I can tell you that for a fact. I learned that in my book interviews. But what I will tell you, Ken, is that this is we are in uncharted territory. And because we're in charted territory, no one really knows what the Supreme Court is going to say or what it's going to do. But on the basis of the Supreme Court majority, my sense is that they are strict constructionists, meaning that they will stick to the letter of the law and the Constitution as best as possible and will find a way to make this work meaning cause the least amount of disruption.
Well, we'll see. As a couple of lawyers that I raised once told me, the only thing that is more difficult to handicap than a jury is handicap what a judge will do. So, I think that there's great anticipation on this from a number of different levels. Let's take it down to the guy walking around the street here in Cincinnati. Sure. 585,000 jobs created in 2025 seems like an inordinately low number. Now, we know that a lot of that, certainly not approaching 2 million, but a lot of those jobs were eliminated by DOGE, and a lot of those were eliminated by other cutbacks inside the federal government. I think unless you work for the federal government, there are not a lot of people weeping for those jobs going away. But there were those jobs that were created in the latter stages of the Biden administration, and when you put 585,000 up against that, it looks a little weak. Was it all because Biden was rebuilding or enjoying the effects of a rebuilding economy after COVID, or is there something else at work here?
So here's what I think it comes down to, a couple of things. One is Biden had a highly regulated economy, and we had regulations that were imposed that cost $1.4 trillion. Those are job killers. They do not incentivize businesses to hire workers. So small businesses, who are the big hiring part of the U.S. economy, they hire 2 of 3 new private sector jobs. Hiring becomes a disincentive because your cost to comply with new regulations are expensive. Inflation grew to 9.1%. And again, for small businesses, it was very difficult to make a profit. So I think the last administration had put policy in place that served as job killers. That was just as simple as that. And the third thing I'll say is that the cost of money, the cost of capital, grew to be too expensive. So small businesses who aren't sitting around with big piles of cash going out to try and get loans, it was expensive to get loans. So when you put those 3 things together, that's really what you're seeing. At the same time, you had major corporate layoffs to the tune last year, I think, of over 1 million. And those corporate layoffs, what did they come from? Well, they came from high cost of doing business, uncertainty around the consumer, what was going to happen with the consumer, and then uncertainty what would happen in the new administration. But what I want you to know is that when you look at those things, productivity in our economy has surged to almost 5%. That's the highest it's been in almost 6 years. The cost of employing people is lower. We're looking at growth, GDP growth. It was 4.3% in the third quarter, could be over 5% in the fourth quarter from last year. But the big issue is this going to be a jobless recovery? And your timing for this conversation is impeccable, because I've spent the entire morning doing research. I'm writing an op-ed article asking the Federal Reserve to come to their senses and reduce interest rates by another 75 basis points. And here's why.
Yeah.
So they cut them 3 times, total of 25 basis points in last year in the third and fourth quarter. But here's the bottom line. Bottom line, it wasn't enough. The cost of capital still too high. If you want the economy to grow, you've got to bring your target federal fund rates down another 75 basis points. And they're worried about inflation. But here's what we know about inflation. Inflation fell. We heard in November in December from what happened in November, from 3.0 to 2.7. The core inflation rate fell to 2.6%. Those numbers will be updated next week, I think Tuesday or Wednesday, and my sense is those numbers will be low again. The issue is the Federal Reserve must aggressively pursue its dual mandate. They're better on inflation. Now it's about employment. And in order to get the employment machine going in small business, they must reduce interest rates by another 75 basis points.
Well, I was just going to say, I think they will, because you're going to get Jerome Powell out of the way here in the next several months. And, his economic philosophies, I think, are not, this is a good word, progressive in this sense. They're not progressive. I just think he's using tactics that might have been in vogue in the 70s and the 80s, and this country and this economy is nowhere close to where it was back then. I think you got to get this guy out of the way before we get to what you want, which is 75 basis points, which is a significant cut, as you well know.
Yeah, it's a significant cut, but I will tell you, it will bring the rates down to the target rate will go from 2.5% to 3%. Right now, it's about 3.5% to 3.75%. And we want small businesses to fully leverage the big, beautiful law and the first year 100% expensing for plants and equipment. If they do, more buildings will get built. They will hire people. More equipment will be purchased. As they're purchasing equipment, the people building that equipment will have to hire more people. Yeah. This has a tremendous magnifier effect. And honestly, I feel like the Federal Reserve is constraining employment at this time with the rates where they are. And as I've been thinking about it, since the jobs numbers came out yesterday, I feel like they're looking at the wrong data. The right data is small business jobs. They were down last year. They had a rebound in December of last year. And the way to get the biggest possible bounce in jobs is to cut those rates. Small business will lead hiring as it has historically.
I think the majority of businesses anyway in this country are small businesses. It's the business that you pass on Main Street on your way to the big box centers. Absolutely. But Dan Varroney is our guest, economic strategist, founder and CEO of Potomac Core strategy planning firm. Here's the one thing, and I don't want to harp on these numbers too much, but in December, most of the gains were in food service, healthcare, social assistance, and the losses were in not only retail trade but manufacturing. Dan, we got to get back in this country to making things. That is the gut of our economy, and it just seems like that's been a problem, not just with this current administration, but the last couple of people that have been in the White House. We got to make things again in this country.
So you're absolutely right. Manufacturing jobs serve as whenever they create a job, they create 2 or 3 jobs in the manufacturing job. 2 or 3 new jobs are created in the service sector. What I like about the big, beautiful law, Ken, is that it has the intention and the pieces to a puzzle that reindustrialize the U.S. economy. And that's what that 100% expensing in plants and equipment is all about. I did a look back on the Reagan tax cuts, and I compared them to the big, beautiful law. And I'm telling you, that they are far more geared to getting the manufacturing economy going a lot faster than even the Reagan tax cuts did. And the Reagan tax cuts were amazing. But they were, for manufacturing, they came in over, they were phased in over 3 years. These come in as a first-year investment. So now I'm going to tell you why I'm excited about this. So I worked for Newt Gingrich a couple of years back in 2009 and 10. And when I first went to work for him, came into my office and I had a big whiteboard in front of me, and he said, so we're going to write a tax plan for small business today. And I said, and he and I argued the Reagan accelerated depreciation versus the 100% expensing. And he said to me, Dan, if you really want to get jobs growing again at a substantial level, it's the 100% expensing first-year write-off. People will invest, they will buy, and it will create jobs throughout the economy. So when this was included by the President and by Treasury Secretary Bessent, I was overjoyed because I learned over a decade ago this is a way to really grow jobs.
Well, I share your optimism about 2026, and I hope it reaches down to all levels of the various age groups that we have, particularly the younger group, Gen Z, because I think it's vital that they have a chance to get out of the gate in a strong manner, and I think it's vital if you're the Trump administration that happens if you indeed want to keep what he has got going now going past when his term is up. But Dan Varroney, our time is up. TomicCore.com is where you can find him. And as always, Dan, we thank you for your time. Stay well, and we'll be calling again.
Thank you. Look forward to it.